I love you.
The old woman
I
was
love
alone
you.
in her house when she found a box of love letters hidden in the wall. She had no idea that the previous owner of the home had left them there 70 years ago. But once she read the first letter, she immediately regretted her decision to investigate. The contents of the letters were so shocking that she even considered calling the police. Before we begin, please take some time to subscribe to the channel. Love can be a wonderful thing, but it can also be painful at times. And sometimes it can even be deadly. That's what happened to the main character in today's story. Our story begins with an elderly woman who decided to renovate her home. She was tired of living in a place full of memories that weren't hers and wanted to make it feel like her own. The only problem was that she didn't have much money. She was a widow and didn't have any children, so she couldn't ask anyone for help, but she was determined to do it on her own. One day, while doing some work in the bathroom, she noticed something strange behind the old wallpaper. There was a small hole there and it looked like something was hiding behind it. The old woman was curious, but she didn't have time to investigate further. She had to finish the job she started and couldn't waste time on useless things. So she put the whole thing out of her mind. A few days later, however, she was back in the bathroom and noticed the hole again. It was still there just as she remembered. But this time she took a closer look and tried to figure out what was going on. After a few minutes of trying different things, she finally managed to get the wall open and see what was inside. To her surprise, there was a small box hidden inside the wall. At first, the old woman thought that maybe it was a mistake and that the previous owner just forgot to take it with them when they moved out. But then she realized that this wasn't possible. The house had been empty for over 70 years, which meant that the box must have been there the whole time. But how did it get in the wall? Was it really a mistake, or was there another explanation? The old woman didn't know, but she was determined to find out. So she carefully took the box out of the wall and brought it to her bedroom. Then she sat down on the bed and opened it. Inside the box, the old woman found a pile of letters and a small key. The letters were tied together with a blue ribbon and had a wax seal on the envelope. The old woman was curious about the letters, but she knew that she shouldn't read someone else's mail, no matter how long it had been since they were written. But curiosity got the better of her and she broke the seal. The letters were written in a beautiful cursive and signed with the name "Your loving Elizabeth." It became clear to the old woman that these were love letters. And the more she read, the deeper she fell into the story of the two lovers. The letters told a tale of forbidden love between a young woman named Elizabeth and a soldier who was away fighting in World War II. They had met each other at a dance and fallen head over heels in love. But then the war had broken out and the soldier had to leave. They had promised to write to each other every week, but the soldier was often too busy to keep up with his letters. Still, Elizabeth never lost hope that he would come back to her someday. The last letter the old woman read was from D-Day, June 6, 1944. In it, the soldier wrote about how he was going into battle and that he might not survive. He told Elizabeth that if he didn't come back, he wanted her to marry his friend John, who would take care of her and their child. He also told her that he loved her more than anything in the world and would never forget her. The soldier never did come back, and 70 years later, the old woman was still holding his final letter in her hands. As she read through the pages, she could feel the emotions of the two lovers as if they were her own. She felt their joy, their sorrow, their hope, and their despair. It was a powerful experience that she would never forget. As the old woman finished reading the last letter, she couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness. She knew that the soldier had died on the battlefield, but it was still sad to think about the potential that he and Elizabeth had wasted away. If they had been able to live their lives together, who knows what kind of family they could have had or what kind of legacy they would have left behind. As she thought about this, the old woman suddenly heard a noise coming from downstairs. At first she thought it was just her imagination, but then she heard it again. Someone was definitely in her house. The old woman quickly hid the letters under her pillow and went to investigate. When she went downstairs, she couldn't see anyone. Maybe she was just hearing things, but then she noticed something strange. One of the windows in the kitchen was open and it hadn't been like that before. The old woman was scared and didn't know what to do. Should she call the police or just pretend that nothing had happened? In the end, she decided to call the cops. When the police arrived, they searched the house but couldn't find anyone. The old woman was relieved, but she couldn't shake off the feeling that she was being watched. Every time she went upstairs, she could feel someone's presence in her bedroom, and every night she heard strange noises coming from the walls. The old woman was at her wit's end and didn't know what to do. She was sure that someone was in her house, but the police couldn't find anything. One day, the old woman decided to go through the box of letters again. This time she was more careful and noticed something she hadn't seen before. One of the letters was slightly different from the others. The wax seal was broken and there was a small stain on the paper. It looked like it had been read before. The old woman was confused, but she couldn't understand why. Who else would have read the letters? And if they had done that, why would they have hidden them in the wall? The old woman was determined to get to the bottom of the mystery. She started by asking around town if anyone knew the history of the house. She also went to the local library and tried to find records of the people who had lived there in the past, but she couldn't find anything. It was like the house had been erased from history. The old woman was about to give up when she met a local historian. He was able to help her find some old documents that revealed the identity of the people who had lived in the house. The man's name was John and the woman's name was Elizabeth. They had married after the war and lived in the house until they died. But what had happened to them after that? The old woman didn't know, but she was determined to find out. She visited their graves and was able to track down some of their relatives. Through them, she learned that John and Elizabeth had had a son, but he had died in infancy. That explained why there was a small stain on one of the letters. It had been a love letter from Elizabeth to her soldier, and she had probably read it to her son before he died. The old woman was touched by the story, but she still had one question. Why had they hidden the letters in the wall? The answer came when she least expected it. One day, the old woman was sorting through some of her late husband's things when she came across a photo album. As she looked through the pictures, she saw a familiar face. It was John, Elizabeth's son. He looked just like her husband, and then it hit her. The letters hadn't been hidden in the wall by Elizabeth. They had been planted there by John when he was a young boy. He had wanted to remember his parents and the love they had for each other. The old woman was moved by the story. She realized that John had been a sweet boy who had lost his parents at a young age. She also realized that the letters were a precious part of his life and that she should honor that by keeping them safe.